Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the From Cameras to Couches podcast. I, as always, am your host, Zach Davis.
And I'm your co-host, Emmy Davis, and we are really excited to kick off with our first weekly highlight.
This is a big one. This is voted on by you guys. We're going to be talking about old ladies. We're going to be talking about fire demons. We're going to be talking about wizards with moving castles. This is Howl's Moving Castle. This is Hayao Miyazaki's 2004 entry into the Studio Ghibli repertoire. One of the best feature films that they've put out. It's certainly one of the big favorites from the early period of Ghibli's. I mean, Ghibli's been around since 1985, but certainly by 2004 they had reached most of the American media. They had started their distribution process with...
At that point, Mononoke and Spirited Away had already both come out.
Yeah, and distribution deal had been secured between them and Walt Disney, who were distributing their videos in the Western audiences at that point. This is good stuff. This is as good as it gets right here. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to talk about the plot of it. So if you do not know, or if you have not seen Howl's Moving Castle, I urge you to go watch it before you listen to this
Pause
podcast.
Pause the podcast right now. We'll be here when you come back. I promise.
Will be spoiling the entire thing. So, I recommend going and seeing it. Some of this stuff, even at age 25, seeing it for the first time is just magical. I cannot promote that.
This is a personal favorite of mine.
This is a little movie. Follows the events of a Diana Wynne Jones novel from 1986. Hayao Miyazaki picked this one up in the early stages of Ghibli, probably about 10 years after they started. And Mr. Miyazaki was quite unhappy with the...
Didn't Ghibli start in Am I crazy by saying the early 90s? Early 90s?
No, it was 85.
Late, okay, 85, okay.
Per my Wikipedia research earlier, it was 85.
Okay.
But yeah, this Mr. Miyazaki was none too happy with the current state of the world. This is right after America had gone into Iraq, and he wanted to make a movie that had some severely anti-war themes to it, and he chose this one. This movie does not exclusively focus on that, but we'll kind of get into a little bit more of the thematic parts of it as we progress through it. But mostly we just want to talk about the plot. We want to talk about the things we love about it. It's all around good stuff. So this premiered in Japan on November 20th of 2004. It came to the West on June 10th of 2005, released into wide release theaters. Got a pretty damn positive reception. It's absolutely magical. I think that a lot of people got captured by that magic in the early 2000s when it released. So the English voice cast, I didn't really list the Japanese voice cast for whatever reason, but I do like watching.
I prefer the sub to the dub. But...
I do like watching anime in Japanese if I can. Mostly just because I'm kind of a proponent of seeing art in the form that it was created.
But that's the beautiful thing about Ghibli films is they take such care with their English voice casts that you can enjoy them thoroughly in both.
Yeah, absolutely. The big list actors of this. I mean, Emily Mortimer is young Sophie in this. John Simmons is Jean Simmons is Grandma Sophie.
It was her last cinema experience. Hello, Wake up.
Rest in peace to Jean Simmons.
I don't know if she died.
Oh, well.
She might have. I just read that earlier today.
Maybe she retired. She was like, I'm old now.
Grandma Sophie.
One of the more pointed castings of this, one that Emily and I talk about all the time, is Christian Bale as Howl. I'm not sure if he we'll talk more about him later. But Christian Bale plays Howl in this movie. Lauren Bacall plays the Witch of the Wastes. Billy Crystal is Calcifer. Billy Crystal, who you may know as Mike Wazowski in Monsters, Inc. He was absolutely cooking in the early 2000s.
One of my all-time favorite castings.
He's just an absolute blast in this movie. Josh Hutcherson plays Markle, so if you like any Josh Hutcherson stuff, good for you. I'm not there with you.
Zach's just out on the
YA novel stuff is just way
sorry,
too much.
Theo James lovers. Sorry, Josh Hutcherson lovers. Zach is not on your side.
Didn't like it when it started. Still don't like it to this day. I'll pass on some Hunger Games stuff. I probably saw the first Maze Runner movie. That's about as far down the rabbit hole as I go. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the plot of this. So again, spoilers if you have not seen this yet. Sit down. I've got it on Blu-ray. Text me. I will give a copy of it to you. It's also streaming on HBO Max.
We have comfortable couches. Just come over.
Yeah. Just come watch it with us. I got the lights that work with the screen and all that stuff. It's just a great event. Okay, so we open on a young Miss Sophie Hatter, who is working at her hometown hat shop. She's feeling a little bit down because her sisters and her mother are, these really flamboyant, beautiful characters that men just want after. And she's a quiet, homely girl. She's the eldest of her siblings. And she just likes working on hats. She just likes making stuff with her hands. Prefers to stay out of the spotlight. She's no social butterfly like her sisters are. And on a visit to her sister Letty, she goes to what's the name of the? Do you remember the name of the place that she goes? Letty's working at
like a little chocolate shop or something.
Yeah, like a bakery or something along those lines. The town has been rumored to be tortured by this evil wizard Howl, who everybody keeps saying has stolen the hearts of these young girls and eaten them. That's how he subsists, living his life. So as she's going to visit her sister Letty, she runs into Mr. Howl himself, who is being trailed by some shadowy figures we don't know much about at the opening of the movie. But he uses her as a bit of a means of escape. They jump into the air.
Or does he? That's something we're going to talk about later.
We'll get into it. But he flies with her up into the air and teaches her how essentially to walk on air. In like one of the best opening sweeping scores moments of any animated film. I
love this movie so much. It's my favorite animated movie, and I am like a massive animated movie fan.
That shot is like pinned to the wall. It's so exceptional. So they escape, and her interaction with Howl prompts a visit from this evil witch, the Witch of the Wastes. She tells Sophie that she's after Howl's heart. Sophie, making the realization that Howl doesn't necessarily eat young girls' hearts is like, okay, well, I'm not telling you where he was. I didn't see him anywhere. And the Witch of the Waste casts a spell on Sophie as she leaves the shop that Sophie's working at. And this spell causes young Miss Sophie to be turned into a 90-year-old woman. This is shocking. I love this series of events because it's just, you're expecting like this nice little adventure, and then all of a sudden you just see somebody rapidly age. It's so well done. After the witch leaves, Sophie kind of goes into a freak out mode, in only the way that a 90-year-old woman can. I mean, she looks in the mirror, sees her face is all wrinkled, and her hands have changed and everything, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, I've got to stay calm," and then paces around for a little bit, and then goes back to the mirror and looks at herself again and says, "Oh my, I've got to stay calm." It's just top notch. It's so charming. Miyazaki just loves elderly people and knows a lot about them and knows how to be like very careful about how he portrays them. I absolutely love like the first 15 minutes of this movie where she's kind of grappling with that.
I totally love how she obviously we have the one scene with the freak out because it's just happened to her, and she's like, oh my gosh, it's happening. And then she wakes up the next day and she's old, and she's just like, I mean, as soon as she leaves the house, she's just like, okay,
I've accepted it.
There's literally a quote about it. She's like, I was made for this.
Yeah, she normally wears like all of the clothes that an old woman would wear anyway. So she's talking about how she's so not happy, but she's fine with the fact that all of her old clothes suit her more now. She's got the little hat with the ribbon on it, and
the three berries.
It's almost an exposure of her persona. I think it's great. So anyway, one of the stipulations on the spell that the witch casts on her, which the witch mentions before she leaves, is that she's not able to tell anybody about the spell. So she tries to avoid her mother and her sister as she goes about her day, but eventually decides that she's going to try and seek out the wizard Howl. So she leaves town. She books it into...
No. She doesn't decide she's going to seek out Howl. She wants to go find the Witch of the Waste, and so she goes into the Waste.
That's right. Okay, yes.
And then she runs into Howl.
Yeah, so
into his castle, I suppose.
Yeah, but she sets out and decides that she's going to go on this grand adventure. In the novel, it's more about her, quote unquote, seeking her fortune. She's like, my lot in life has been played. My hand is visible to me. I'm going to do something with it. So she escapes from home and moves out into the waste where she hopes she can find the witch to break the curse. She assures the world that her frailty is in body alone. She is just perseverant. She will not accept help from anybody, but not in a dismissive way, more in an out of kindness way. Just
she doesn't want to be an inconvenience. Yeah. She's like, let me be. I'll let you be.
It's pretty.
She helps out others along the way.
Yeah, she's just a great character. So she finds this scarecrow turned upside down in a bush, and she doesn't know it's a scarecrow initially. She just thinks it's a cane. So she pulls him out of the bush, and he stands right side up, but without the bottom of him planted in the ground. So immediately you're like, okay, I know something's up with the scarecrow. It's got a big turnip for a head, and it's got a little face drawn on it.
Famously her least favorite vegetable.
Yeah, she's not a fan of it. So she asks it if she could. She asks it if it would go find her something to help walk with, and it goes and finds her a cane. And then she jokingly says, well, maybe you can just find me a place to stay for tonight. And the scarecrow disappears around the bend and comes back a couple minutes later, and behind it is this massive castle walking on chicken legs. It's Howl's castle.
Howl's moving castle.
It's moving. It is moving right along. The castle stops to let her in, but not before she gets on. She has to run a little bit and catch up with it, and ends up leaving the scarecrow behind. So she goes into the castle and notes that it is way smaller on the inside than it looks on the outside. The outside is no beauty itself. It's like several hunks of scrap metal thrown together with some tiling for roofing, and
there's paper mache involved and stuff like that.
It's not what you would typically expect out of a castle.
We're saying castle,
but
don't let that build your image of this glorious royal thing.
Yeah, if you have seen anything around this movie, you've probably seen the castle. It does not look great. It visually is very appealing, but it just as far as the state of repair, it's not exactly clean.
Which kind of
which segues into the next part where she walks into the room, which is just this open room. It's got a hearth, it's got a table, but everything is covered in just mess. I mean, it's covered in books,
dishes,
it's covered in scrolls,
dirt.
It's an absolute state of disarray. So she sits down in her little rocking chair that's right in front of the hearth, and as she's nodding off, the fire starts speaking to her and reveals himself to be the fire demon Calcifer. And she is not really particularly interested in conversing with this fire right now because she is just dead tired from a day of hiking out into the mountains. So Calcifer and her kind of come to an agreement that he will help her break her curse if she helps him break his, which is bound to Howl to more or less be in servitude in operating this castle. And you find out that Calcifer is more or less if I say more or less again, I'm gonna freak out. Calcifer is the one operating this castle. Sophie falls asleep. She wakes up the next morning. There's a little kid running around. In the book, he's a little bit more of a teenager. He's old enough to court Letty.
And that was something I wanted to say. I'm sorry. I was going to save this for the fun fact, but you brought it up and I have to do it now. So Markle in the English casting is played by Josh Hutcherson. And then Letty is played by Jenna Malone in the English casting, which she was also in Hunger Games. She's
good for her.
She's the gosh, what's her name? It's Joanna or something like that.
She's from one of the districts.
Yeah,
you don't know what district she's from?
She's the one that gets naked in the elevator.
Fake fan.
It is Joanna. It is Joanna. I was right.
Never get naked in the elevator.
Don't plan on it. Can't say that one's on my bucket list.
I'm advising the people, not you. You do as you please.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm glad I have your permission.
This little boy is running around the castle in an attempt to help people that are coming to the front door. They're knocking. He's opening up the door, and they're asking for spells. They're asking for anything that would help them. It's revealed throughout the course of this sequence that Howl's Castle has a front door that opens to several different locations, two of which are Port Haven and Kingsbury, which are different cities in these two great countries that are currently at war with each other. Now, the war is kind of an overarching theme of the movie more than it is an actual part of the movie. A lot of events revolve around what's happening with the characters as opposed to what's happening with the war, but it is an ever-looming presence in the background and in a lot of cases the foreground of this movie.
Whenever Howl's gone, what's he doing?
He's off fighting the masses.
He's in the war.
They find out that, or Sophie finds out that Howl has access to both of these places at the same time. It's revealed that he is operating under 2 different wizard names to prevent himself from being compromised, and he's operating under the names of Pendragon and Jenkins. Different customers come for different things. There's a little girl that comes in asking for her safety spell for her dad's fishing vessel. Anyway, so all of that happens, and Markle finally sits down. The little boy is Howl's apprentice, if you haven't figured it out this far yet. I probably should have told you that earlier, but hey, that's on me.
I got us off track.
Hey, nature of the beast. So yeah, Markle sits down and he's getting ready for breakfast, and he's pretty much just like grabbing anything that looks edible in piles of like molding potatoes and leeks and all this kind of stuff. It's just an absolute
It's clearly
nightmare.
been a while since Howl's been home.
So he's flipping through all of the things, and Sophie's like, well, I'm gonna make us breakfast. And Calcifer is not somebody that is so easily coaxed into cooking things. So Sophie has to threaten to pour water on him in order for him to actually listen to her, and he starts...
That's not her only threat. That's her most vocal threat.
Oh, yeah. She also threatens to tell Howl about the deal that they made. So he eventually gives in. She starts cooking, and then Howl comes in. He returns from a place unknown. He enters through a differently color-coded door than the other places that the door goes to. It's pitch black. You can't really tell where he's coming from, but he comes in, sees Sophie cooking, kind of raises an eyebrow at that, because typically Calcifer is not somebody that exactly...
That only lets Howl cook.
Yeah. So they all end up sitting down and having breakfast together. Howl takes over the cooking, asks Sophie what she's there for, and she's like, well, I'm the new cleaning lady. Markle is none too impressed by this. He's like, I don't need anything cleaned in here. So
she claims that Calcifer hired her.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, she. So they all sit down. They finish this breakfast. Howl goes to bed. Markle does Howl leave again? I think Howl leaves again at some point. But Markle receives requests from. He opens the door and gets requests from both Kingsbury and Port Haven for Howl to report to the kings of each respective kingdom as both the wizards Pendragon and Jenkins. Howl does not plan on doing this. There's a lot of backstory with like him in the Royal Academy and that kind of stuff, and he's kind of obliged to return to
even
these
though he's like this
and,
strong wizard, he's kind of a coward. Like, that's a massive thing.
Yeah, he continues to just run away from, instead of solving problems, he just chooses to run away from them instead. So Sophie, Markle, and Howl eat breakfast together. Markle gets the word about the kings. Howl asks Sophie to visit the king on his behalf as his mother. She reluctantly agrees. This is after she's been cleaning the castle for several days. People outside are like wondering what the hell's going on with all the dust that's flying in the air. And Markle tells them that there's just a witch that's rampaging inside. So he asks Sophie to go to the castle. She does. He says that he's going to be watching her the whole time in disguise, so there's nothing to worry about. But on her way to the castle, she comes across a small dog-like creature that only wheezes. He only goes...
And she assumes that it's Howl because he promised to be disguised, accompanying her.
It is not Howl, but you don't know that yet. She also runs into the Witch of the Waste, who has also apparently been summoned by the Grand Sorceress Solomon. There's a series of trials. Not a series of trials. There's one trial in particular. The Witch of the Waste is like absurdly large, and not young. She's not a great looking woman, and by any stretch of the imagination, she's kind of a
well, and she has one of the biggest hats in the movies. Which the bigger the hat, the worse the character.
Oh, good to know. I actually didn't note that.
Yeah. That's why her henchmen have big hats too.
Her henchmen are carrying her in this little carriage box, and she has to get out of the carriage box because there's a magic barrier. So she and Sophie are then forced to walk up like several flights of stairs, which they both immediately regret. But they get to the top, they get into the castle, they're accepted into the castle. Sophie goes one direction. She's motioned on by this small manservant, and the Witch of the Waste is shown in almost like a seance, where we find out she's completely robbed of her power and returned to her original age, where she's like this decrepit old woman and she can't really function. She almost...
Hey, she got tired coming up those stairs. That chair was right there. What was she supposed to do?
It's really interesting. It's almost like she has like Alzheimer's or something like that. She acts like she has some kind of degenerative brain disease after that. Or, she's just really,
incredibly
really old.
Like literally 800 years old or something.
Yeah, so Solomon, the sorceress, sits Sophie down and asks her, why are you here instead of Howl? Where's he been? Informs her that Howl was once her apprentice, but he lost his heart, and they were never able to repair their relationship. While this conversation is happening, the Witch of the Waste is wheeled out to Sophie, and we see her in her like melted old lady form. Sophie realizes that the wizard Solomon is trying, or the sorceress Solomon is trying to do the same thing to Howl.
I'll also note that the Witch of the Waste no longer has a hat.
Yeah.
At this point.
Rest in peace to the hat. Her dog companion is revealed to be the sorceress's pet dog.
No,
he doesn't really like the sorceress all that much though. So when Howl shows up as the king himself, in disguise as the king, he tells the wizard Solomon that, there's all these issues going on, he's got to fix these things. And then the real king comes into the room, and talks to the wizard Solomon, and she pretty much turns to Howl and is like, okay, hello, how are you? They make a great escape, and along with Sophie, the Witch of the Waste and the dog Heen are brought along. Howl breaks off from their group and says, I'll distract them, use this ring, and this will point you towards home. So they're now in this flying hovercraft kind of thing. They fly all the way back to the castle, crash into the castle.
Which I also really love, because he does say it points home, and I love that at this point of the movie, like, they've just kind of accepted that they're all like, it's found family. I love found family.
I love little found family stuff.
It's fabulous. And I just love that.
Yeah, so there are next some sequences of soldiers breaking into the original buildings of both the Wizard Pendragon and Jenkins, which upon breaking down the doors, they find that there's nothing there. The door has been sealed. So Sophie gets back to the castle. She learns that Calcifer and Howl are bonded beyond just servitude. Calcifer brokered a deal with Howl that allowed him to use magic, and the condition for that was that Calcifer would get to hang on to Howl's heart. Howl's been transforming this whole time into like a bird-like creature to interrupt both sides of the war. He's destroying aircraft. He's trying to save injured people.
He's like, be done.
Yeah. So it maybe not so heartless. In a show of affection for Sophie, when Howl returns from his latest venture, he transforms the house to look more like her original home and actually links the door to the outside of her home back in. I guess they never mentioned the name in the movie, but yeah, it is the hat shop. Yeah. I think the inside gets transformed into her little nook in the hat shop, and then the outside is the courtyard of her home.
She lives in the hat shop.
Oh, well.
Because it's owned by her mother.
I guess it's a dual thing. But yeah, he transforms it into this thing, and she's like, this is super nice of you. And he says, I have one more thing to show you, and brings her out this door into like this beautiful verdant glade full of flowers, and tells her that it's his homeland. It was where he grew up. She starts rapidly de-aging. There have been a couple of sequences in which we've seen her become younger in this, but she starts to de-age when she sees this and sees the effort that he put into showing her something like this.
So I want to talk about. Should I talk about that now or later?
Let's save it for later.
Okay.
I think once we get into the
thematic I don't have a note about it, so don't let me forget to bring it up.
Okay. She starts de-aging, but she still has her silver old lady hair. She turns back old when Howl tells her that she's going to leave again, and she says something along the lines of, "As an older person, you have nothing really to lose. I'm okay with whatever you need to do." So the war finally comes to Sophie's hometown shortly after this, and her town is destroyed, the house is destroyed. In an effort to rescue everybody, she leads them through a different door of Howl's Castle out into the waste, which is the door she originally entered through, and decides to bring Calcifer out of the castle, which causes the castle to completely collapse. There are a couple of pieces of it that still work, which Calcifer uses to turn into like a tiny walker for her, Sophie, Markle, Calcifer, and the Witch of the Waste.
And Heen.
I forgot. Heen's
How could you forget?
Heen rocks.
Heen rocks.
So,
for sure.
In destroying the castle, Howl's heart is now more or less out in the open, and the Witch of the Waste notices this. She makes an attempt to grab the heart, which then, due to it being held by a fire demon, causes her to catch on fire. She goes up in flames, and Sophie, in a state of panic, douses her with water. Now, this puts Calcifer out and puts Howl's heart completely cold. Sophie is then like jarred off of the machine that they're on that Calcifer was once using or operating. She gets thrown down into a canyon, and in a state of despair, it is like, I've killed Howl, I've killed Calcifer, I don't know what to do.
Womp womp. And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, the end. That's Howl's Moving Castle.
Didn't you love it?
So she ends up following the light on the ring that she was given by Howl, which points her to the door of the castle, which we finally get to see what the other color coding of that Howl typically uses. It brings Sophie into Howl's past, where we see him out in the glade that she had been to with him. We see him as a young boy catching a falling star, the falling star which we find out to be Calcifer. Calcifer brokers the deal with Howl, where he gets his heart, Howl gets the powers, and they start this relationship. But Sophie calls out to them in the past and says, "Wait for me," and leaves the door.
I'll find you in the future.
She certainly does, and when she comes out, there's Howl. In bird form, he's completely just damaged. He's in pain. She asks him if he can make one big effort to return her back to the group, which he does. He flies up to the top of this canyon where everybody is still hanging out. They find the witch is still hanging onto Howl's heart. Howl collapses. He's completely spent at this point after trying to defend them from all the bombings that were happening. He's been defending them from wizards that have transformed themselves into monsters in order to fight in the king's army. And Sophie coaxes the witch to give her the heart back, highlighting that she truly does love Howl. The witch is like, "All right, I can see that you very clearly love him, and this is more important than anything that I could offer to him." She places the heart back in Howl's chest, reviving both him and Calcifer. Calcifer, now free of his bonds as a once fallen star, zips around and is really excited, and decides that he would rather stay with the group than return to the heavens. Sophie's curse is now broken completely. She returns to her young woman form, and in a show of affection for the Scarecrow who has accompanied them, which I guess I kind of glazed over, but the Scarecrow's with them, he helps him out a little bit. She gives him a kiss on the cheek. The Scarecrow transforms into the young prince that was missing, that started the whole war.
Oh, surprise!
Big surprise, and promptly says, "All right, thumbs up, thank you guys. So I can see that your affections are with Howl, but the curse could only be broken with the true love's kiss. So I'm gonna go back to my home kingdom and tell them to stop this war." That's it. That's the end of the movie. Howl and Sophie are seen flying in a castle together, which is the sequel book, but was never made into a movie. I think it's Castle in the Air or something like that.
It's not, no, because Castle in the Sky is a previous Miyazaki movie. Okay. But this one, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it is Castle something.
Yeah. But that's more or less where the movie ends. Howl and Sophie live happily ever after as far as Studio Ghibli is concerned. top-notch stuff. The first time I saw this, I was like, this is just such a whimsical adventure.
I think I cried, like, or at least not like heartbreak cried, but just like happy cried, like so many times. It's just so touching.
It's so heartfelt. It's got so many good things going for it. There's some deeply thematic stuff going on in here, and
it
for
is
that
Castle
to be.
In the Air. I'm sorry I shut you down. It is Castle in the Air.
I'll take that win. 1-0. This movie is so good. It
chef's kiss,
warms the
truly.
heart. It makes you feel like you're like, oh my god, I did not know that something could be this magical.
You can watch this at 5 years old and love it, and you can watch it at 95 years old and love it. Like, it's so good.
So it manages to be an absolute smash hit of an adventure, incredibly heartfelt and deeply thematic at the same time. Because there's so much stuff going on in here with the themes.
So many points hit.
We'll get into a little bit more of the themes later, but this movie is absolutely gorgeous to look at. Hand-drawn stuff is just fantastic, and all of the backgrounds were originally hand-drawn and hand-painted in this, which were then scanned into the computers. Same with the characters. The characters were hand-drawn and scanned into the computers and made digitally. So Miyazaki was inspired by some 19th century illusion art to make a lot of this movie, and I think a lot of that goes into the castle itself and the towns and how they look. Yeah, it's unbelievable stuff. I mean, you will not be able to take your eyes off the screen while you're watching this, and
it's
another
start to finish just perfect.
Just something to note as one of the best parts of the movie, just for posterity's sake. Christian Bale is not exactly lights out in this movie, but
he uses,
very
interestingly
memorable
enough,
performance.
He uses an American accent.
Yeah,
but
it sounds like
he's raising you up the whole time.
For
That's how
lack
it
of a
feels.
better term, it's he's horny as hell this entire movie.
He's just
It's like
raising
he
you
took
up.
gas station boner pills before they did all the VA for it. It's hilarious. It goes for some good lines. There's all kinds of good stuff. Billy Crystal as Calcifer is a smash. And Billy Crystal also just an absolute.
I love this movie so much. I love it in Japanese. I love it in English. I love it on mute. I love it without the screen on, and I'm just listening to it. There's
just such a sense of joy surrounding the entirety of the movie.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, but Billy Crystal, you're the man. He is so good at like all of these line deliveries, and especially for an Eastern media property where he had just come out of like a lot of Western work, particularly Mike Wazowski, and how animated that role is and how much he has to do for that role. He does not have to do nearly as much work in this, but he sells the same thing. He sells that smaller character that's got smaller in stature, I guess, more than anything, but it just with a big mouth. He's so good at that stuff. Yeah, let's talk about some of the themes of this movie, because that's where the pile driver really comes in for me. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this movie. We mentioned the anti-war themes that happen earlier in the movie, but Hayao Miyazaki was pretty pissed at American audiences, not American audiences, at America in general at this time, just because he's a massive pacifist. That is no commentary on where I stand about anything about the politics of Iraq, but he was not happy about it. He did not expect this movie to be received well by American audiences at all. He expected it to be shunned, and believe it or not, I don't know if people just couldn't see the writing on the wall or what. Everybody loved it when it came out.
It's their highest grossing film. It's their most commercial film.
Yeah, so the anti-war themes of this, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Howl is the anti-war character in this, where he's operating on neither side of the war. He acts as a solo entity that's just ultimately just trying to protect people from the damage that war does. It doesn't delve into that nearly as much as I feel like it should. I might be reading it wrong, but I do love the way that it tackles that issue.
More vigilante than anything.
Yeah, and it's hard to tackle that in something that is meant to be accessible for everybody, because you can't just show... You can show destruction and horror and that kind of stuff, but you can't graphically, explicitly point those things out to children that might get scared by it. Which, I mean, ultimately is a good thing to take away from it, but you don't want a kid scared of the movie that they saw. That you want them to be able to to take what they learn from it.
Well, they're also, the studio is, like, the tag is Ghibli Kids.
Yeah, G Kids.
G Kids.
Heartlessness and covetousness. Howl's persona slowly starts to crack throughout the entire movie. I mean, he's majorly focused on helping prevent damage in this war. He's trying to mitigate everything that he can, but
he's also a selfish creature, and he gets caught up in himself and his own misery.
Yeah,
so...
and he's got like this kind of cold stare to people surrounding him, even though they may be showing their care for him. He's not really showing it. His affection for Sophie is ultimately what brings him back, and her affection for him is ultimately what gets his heart back into his chest. And it's an interesting It's an interesting pairing with the witch, who covets after Howl's heart as something that she wishes to win at force, not through mutual affection. And then when she sees love in Sophie at the end of this movie, she finally understands what that's about, and she understands, the value of the little family that they've found together, and that brings her to ultimately reckon with her selfishness and assumedly live what I can only guess would not be a very long life after that, because she is quite old.
R.I.P. to the Witch of the West.
Yeah, and which segues into my next big theme, old age. There's
a lot of it in this movie.
Hayao Miyazaki loves elderly people. I think I said that earlier, but he just has a really good
appreciation
of those who came before us, what they learned, what they've taught us. Sophie's experience as an elderly woman is massively charming, for the most part. I mean, just the way that she reacts to stuff, the thin temperament that she gets, it's all great. And she's far from helpless, which I think is a very big pinning point, that she is not just somebody that...
It's like what we were talking about earlier. She doesn't want to be an inconvenience to anybody, but she also, like, can stand on her own and...
Yeah, she's very I'm fine, thank you about the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Like I said, this is a recurring theme in Miyazaki movies, old age. He wants us to care and respect for our elders, ultimately, not talk down to them and promote to them that they are far from useless. They have value in the things that they've learned in their lives. And another big Miyazaki old people movie is his most recent one, The Boy and the Heron. There's a lot of elderly commentary in that one, but that one is a much tougher swallow than this movie. It is substantially
big old
less
horse
accessible.
pill to swallow.
I do fondly regard that movie, but it is not something that I'd just be like, oh, this Howl's Moving Castle is a GA
Casual
movie. This
watch.
is for everybody. Boy and the Heron is something that you would almost sit down and study.
You need to. I remember going to see it in theaters after seeing Spirited Away, and I was just like, oh, this is way deeper, and I feel like I should have done research before I came into this movie.
Yeah, the core themes of it are much more
it's super
self-reflective on Miyazaki's life himself, his relationship with his son, his relationship with his family, his love of flying, his inability to give up control of things. It's all good. So anyway, that's The Boy and the Heron. We're talking about Howl's Moving Castle. The next theme that I want to note in this movie is feminism. This is a girl power movie. I have absolutely no problem with that.
It's not like oh my gosh, here's the Barbie movie.
It's not waving the flag
of
feminism in your face.
It's the Supreme Court and what have you. But this is it is the perfect, like, this is the form of feminism that I feel, where it's not like, oh well, we're
respectful feminism.
Yes, respectful feminism
from a man. Much like old age, Miyazaki does not create damsels in distress in this movie. There's nobody that is in need of rescuing in this movie. No. Sophie goes out and seeks her fortune on her own time. She's an unwavering symbol of perseverance in the face of several larger-than-life men. Her strength comes from her alone, and her faults are hers to own until she finds the family that she amplifies those things through. Her heart is open and caring, but not easily swept along, as Howl may attempt to do in the opening sequence of the movie, which I think is just such a great sequence of her being, lifted up into the air by Howl, learning how to walk on air for the first time, and she is and isn't swept away by that, because she's strictly more prudent than that. She's not a prude, but she's reasonable.
She has a good head on her shoulders, and she's not terribly romantic.
Yeah, I find that to be massively valuable. And overall, this movie is about compassion. It's about the love that we show to one another. It's about the love that we show to families, found or otherwise. It's about the ways that we relate to each other, how we talk to each other,
It's about finding joy in the ordinary. It's about selflessness. It's about beauty and what that can be, and it's about everything good. I love this movie.
So great. Okay, we're gonna move on to another little segment that we've got here, which is favorite scenes in the movie.
I'm so excited.
The opening scene of this is just phenomenal. Sophie's first time meeting Howl when she walks on air. I know I've talked about it like 3 times now, but it's high quality stuff. If you have not
guaranteed smile plastered on your face.
Yeah, if you have not heard the suite from this movie, which you probably have through Instagram or TikTok or whatever at this point, but I urge you to just look up Howl's Moving Cast Suite and play the first song that comes up. I think it's like the Windmill of Life or the Merry-Go-Round of Life is the name of the suite, but it's just beautiful. It paired with the imagery of them walking in the air over this crowd of people that are dancing, celebrating the initiation of the war.
And
it's just such striking imagery.
This is done by the, if I'm not mistaken, New Japanese Philharmonic?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it just an all-around excellent scene. Sophie has to stay calm is my next scene, right after she turns into an old woman.
I have that one too.
The way that she conducts herself after that whole event
I have to stay calm.
It is charming. You will always chuckle at it. It is so like authentically elderly human. He's got such an understanding for that in this scene. The third one that I have on the list, and Emily and I were discussing this earlier, or Emmy, sorry. We pretty much have the same exact scenes written down.
I have a few different.
Breakfast with Calcifer, when she first has to break Calcifer into the fact that she's making breakfast. He is just such a... It's just got such a great back and forth. He's just got such a great back and forth with her. Billy Crystal just rocks in the scene. I was watching this scene in Japanese, I think the second or third time I was watching this movie, and I switched it to the English dub, and this is when I first found out that Billy Crystal played Calcifer in the English dub. And I was like, all right, screw it. I'm watching the rest of the movie in English. Howl to the Rescue is another one of my favorite scenes, which happens occasionally in this movie, but the one big time is when she's at the Grand Wizard Solomon's visitation room, and he comes in as the king comes in, she says, hello, Howl, they get into like a mild battle with each other, and then Howl rescues Sophie and the Witch of the Waste and Heen, and they all fly off in this thing. He gives Sophie invisibility and like duplicates the thing that they're riding on and distracts all the guards. It's a really good little sequence. Sophie has to learn on the fly how to fly, prompting some just great little lines of dialogue about just, figuring things out. It's awesome.
For me, the next one is, and this is, I think, where we differ, or maybe have, like, some connection, but it's kind of 2 scenes that go hand in hand, and it's really something that, on your second watch, you're like, oh, because when Howl is first introduced, Sophie is being accosted by this guard, for lack of a better term. He's coming on to her pretty hard, and she can't really get away. And Howl comes up behind her, as charming as he is, wraps his arm around her and says, "Oh, there you are, sweetheart. I've been looking for you. I'm so sorry I took so long." Something along these lines. Which, again, second watch. When we get to the scene towards the end of the movie where she says, "Find me in the future," That's him finding her in the future. It's so perfect. And I just, like, ugh.
It's a joy. It's a
You can watch this movie 100 times and find something new to delight in every single time.
The last one that I had listed is just when she returns his heart. We'll talk about favorite quotes next, and I'm just going to go ahead and post one of my favorite quotes.
First, one more thing. My last scene, and this is all I have, just Ghibli hug TM.
Yeah.
Trademark Ghibli hug. Give me one.
Yeah. We could all use a Ghibli hug.
Everyone needs a Ghibli hug, you know?
Everybody come over to my house for a Ghibli hug before the election. Yes, the last scene is Sophie returns Hal's heart, and during which there's a quote that I think is my favorite quote of the movie. I've got several highlighted, but
I know exactly what it is, and I also have it.
Yeah, she puts the heart back in his chest, and he wakes up, and he says, "I feel terrible, like there's a weight on my chest." And she looks at him and says, "Heart's a heavy burden." Just top notch, applause all around. I get chills every time I see it. It's just so well done, and a lot of the issue that I have with translating stuff from Japanese to English or just working around that is that typically when you're doing Japanese and English are very differently structured languages, and when you have a scene set for, they're going to hold on these faces for 5 seconds and they're going to say some things back and forth to each other. Sometimes in Japanese they have to, or sometimes in English, they have to change what the person is saying in order to fit it into that small sequence.
Lip sync a little better.
This is one of those things where you're like, that rings true. That is one of those things that it does not matter if it's in the original language or anything that it's been dubbed to. It's just beautiful.
And I feel like this line, really, I mean, we've talked a lot about the themes of this movie. If you were to take one thing from this podcast to sum up Howl's Moving Castle, for me, it's a heart's a heavy burden. Yeah. That is just that encapsulates all the pain and joy and humanity. It's perfect. I love that line.
It is those are the reasons that I like talking about this stuff. That what we can bring away from these things, and it's really easy to get swept up into the fantasy land, the delusion of my life's a movie, and I'm out here having fun, and everything has to be super dramatic, or otherwise it's not fun. These are the things that you can just pin and be like, I don't care who you are. That's something that you can take to your life. Another few quotes. We'll kind of alternate on these, but Calcifer when he's making breakfast with Sophie tells her that here's another curse for you. I hope all your bacon burns. Just funny. I just love that
Enjoyable.
one.
For me, this is a classic staple of the Davis household here. But when Zach and I first started watching Howl's with the dub, we're very much subtitle people. We don't watch a lot of stuff in dub, and so it was kind of like a out-of-the-box thing on the third watch after he had discovered that Billy Crystal played Calcifer. And I will never forget sitting there watching the movie, and they're having breakfast. And Christian Bale, Howl, played by Christian Bale, is sitting there, and the curse hits the table, and he just says, "That can't be good for the table.
That can't be good for the table.
That can't be good for the table." And that's just, I don't know, that's just one that stuck with me. It's the way he delivers it. It's
Paul Allen's card.
Yes, it's very much internal dialogue from American Psycho, and I enjoy it.
Oh, it's so great. It's just top notch. Some people love it. I love it simply because it's there. That's it. It's just a funny little feature of watching this movie.
Actually, when I was looking up, I've been doing research for this all day, obviously, and I was looking up some of the best lines and seeing what other people thought and where I landed, and that was number 5.
Yeah,
that can't be good for the table.
Imagine that.
I was dang, we're not alone.
Oh, it's so good. One of the others is an exchange between Howl and Calcifer, which happens about 3/4 of the way through the movie. When Howl returns, he's talking about how he's having a hard time transforming back into a human after he assumes this bird-like figure to fight everybody, and Howl says, the war is terrible. They bombed from the southern coast to the northern border. It's all in flames now. And Calcifer says, I can't stand the fire and gunpowder. Those dopey guys have absolutely no manners. Howl retorts with, my own kind attacked me today. And Calcifer says, who? The Witch of the Wastes? Howl says, no. Some hack wizards who turn themselves into monsters for the king. Calcifer says, those wizards are going to regret doing that. They'll never change back into humans. Howl said, after the war, they won't recall they were ever human. Come on.
That's just excellent commentary about...
That's as fire as a fire demon itself.
I mean...
Did you have any more? I have one last one.
I mean... I love the drama of this movie. I love how dramatic every character is. I love that Sophie's the one that's kind of got a good head on her shoulders and she's just done with everybody's crap. But for me it's after Howl's hair gets changed and he says hold on. Okay, where is it? I see no point of living if I can't be beautiful.
And it proceeds to have the biggest freak out, crash out of all time.
almost kills himself over his hair.
Yeah, summons
you
the
know
dark
what?
spirits.
We've all been there, Howl. We've
yeah.
all been there. So I get it. I really do.
Hey, if you can't be beautiful, what's the point? That is a very heartless thing of Howl to say.
Well, and it's also this is so telling of his character at this point in the movie, because he has, this is the point of the movie, he has nothing really to live for until he kind of discovers that there's beauty in the simple things.
Another thing that highlights his character at that point in the movie is Sophie. When she's going to see the Grand Wizard Solomon, she's looking around to try and figure out which thing Howl has disguised himself as. She eventually comes across Heen, which isn't actually Howl, but she says, I wonder what Howl disguises himself as. Surely not a crow. Can't be a pigeon. He's too flamboyant for that. And then a plane flies over with a young woman and her lover, and she says, that could be him. It's just so great.
And he's just so shallow, and at the beginning of the movie, and I just love...
It's just a perfect relationship.
Yes. Watch the movie if you haven't. If you're still here and you haven't watched this movie yet, come on.
You gotta watch that movie.
We talked about it
watch that movie. It is an A+.
That's all I have for you.
Okay, so there are a couple more things I want to go over before we get to our conclusion. Yes. But the soundtrack.
God, what can you say about the soundtrack other than 10 out of 10?
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful waltz.
I will cry.
Yeah, it's so good. One of the things that I wanted to do in these weekly highlights is I want to have a brief section called entertaining, enlightening, or both. I think this movie is both.
Yes.
It undoubtedly is a joy to watch. It is.
I have written down entertaining, enlightening, both. Yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, it's
all of the
hits
above.
all three marks. It's so good. We'll probably talk about something like Boogie Nights at some point on the podcast, which is another one of me and Emily's favorite movies. We've seen it screened in 35mm in the original print. It's something that we just absolutely love, and that falls more into the category of entertaining.
Enlightening.
Not necessarily enlightening. There are some things you can take away from it, but ultimately it is a pretty dour movie.
At the end of the day,
this one unquestionably
both.
It's
for sure.
It's top notch. Okay, so in conclusion, there's a couple other things I wanted to go over, but one minor gripe I have about this movie, the only thing that holds this movie back from being a 10 out of 10 flick for me, some stuff does not feel perfectly fleshed out in this movie.
It's also hard coming off you read the novel and there's stuff missing, and the prince at the end.
Yeah,
and it's
that's the big thing.
It falls apart a little bit.
There are a lot of plot points that I feel like should have been fleshed out in this movie, but not without extending the runtime to a point where it probably would overstay its welcome.
Yes.
I think the prince showing up at the end is great. I think they probably could have afforded to take the scarecrow out of this as a whole. And
but then how does she come across the castle?
It's good imagery, but I feel like they could have found another way.
Even if they'd put another 5 minutes about him, I think that would have worked.
Yeah,
but also
agreed.
The runtime of this movie is pretty perfect. There's, in my opinion, there's not a terrible amount of fat.
No, it definitely not. There is not.
There's not any point where I'm not enjoying myself.
Yeah,
and I love every single second of this movie. I have it in. You already said 9 out of 10?
Yeah.
I have it in a 9.5 out of 10.
I've got a 9 out of 10 on this one. The
love
only thing that holds it back is just a little bit more potential, I think, that could have been squeezed out of it, but I think ultimately, as this project, it's perfect as is. Best double feature.
Yes, I have one written down, but are we going to do the It Must Be True segment? I had some good fun facts.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. I didn't write anything down.
Okay, so I have a few. This is the It Must Be True segment, our version of half-assed internet research.
Thank you to the Rewatchables podcast.
Here's a fun fact for you. This is one of many Miyazaki movies where a Batman actor plays a main character. We have got Christian Bale, obviously, as Howl in this from the Dark Knight trilogy. Keaton plays Porco Rosso in one of Hayao Miyazaki's original films, who played Batman in 1989. And then we also have Pattinson in The Boy and the Heron. And then we also, little bonus, we have Mark Hamill, who played the Joker in Batman and was also in The Boy and the Heron. Also, Christian Bale was in The Boy and the Heron. How about that?
That's awesome. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted. I just saw a Letterboxd notification that was talking about, it's a Letterboxd interview with Sean Baker going to make the 35mm print of Anora with some people on Letterboxd. Ferb, I know what I'm going to do today. I'm sitting down and reading that
Ferb,
as
I
soon
know what
as
I'm
this
going
is
to do
over.
today. I can't. Okay. Side note, can't wait for Anora. But coming back to my fun facts. I really love that this is not something that's revealed in the movie, but it's something revealed in the book. Howl is a Welsh character, and Christian Bale is a Welshman. And I love that he plays a Welsh guy. I think that's a sweet little thing. Miyazaki also went to England a year before this released there. It was the same year that it released in Japan, granted. But he still went and did a private screening for Diana
Wynne-Jones?
Yes, the author of the original Howl's Moving Castle trilogy. Which I just think is super sweet.
It's very cool. Very, very cool. I
kind of have brought up the rest of my notes throughout the rest of this podcast, but...
I would love to... I'd fly on the wall of that, of
Imagine!
Miyazaki and Diane just, like, conversing about the property that they've created and iterated on. It's so cool.
That's a beautiful thing. Okay.
Jumping back. Best double feature. What do you think?
So I think you could go really... I mean, it's super easy to go with another Ghibli film here. You could go with something lighter like My Neighbor, or you could go with something that has that depth to it, like Mononoke or The Boy and the Heron. But I chose to stick with the anime film theme, but leave the Ghibli family, and I'm going with Suzume.
Good
You can catch her on Netflix. It's a great little movie. I think it's like an hour 45, something like that.
Yeah, very,
super enjoyable,
very charming,
little
very
whimsical.
Similar themes to like young woman meets a boy that is not necessarily all that he seems to be,
but also incredibly charming. I think it's very similar to this.
I think very, very good match. I had Mononoke because that is my number one Ghibli film. That's
no judgment for that.
Just as obvious as it gets. I mean, I just love that movie. I also had Monsters Inc. I think Monsters Inc. is a nice
trying to find something
nice
more...
little family, like found family feature in a lot of ways. It's got like that. It's a little more heart wrenching at the end. But I think it just paces itself well. I just think that those two movies, in contrast to each other, especially with the Billy Crystal feature back to back, just
I think that's a really good connection. I was also trying to find like a Disney movie that, like, I had thought about Tarzan or Mulan, like something that had the similar, like,
Brother Bear or
found family, but also has romantic themes. And I couldn't pin it down, and then Suzume popped into my head, and I was like, that's the one I'm sold.
Truly, Howl's is just a unique thing. I mean, the way that it operates, the way it conducts itself is just so well founded. If you liked that, you'll like this, is my next segment on the show. Now, this is a segment that I came up with because I was so sick and tired of seeing something that I could not get out of my head and not being able to find anything similar that I hadn't already seen. I put down The Boy and the Heron for this. I think that The Boy and the Heron is something that if you like digging into a movie like this, you are going to eat it up, fork and spoon. And, I mean, knife, I guess. Sophie does choose a fairly dirty spoon in this movie, but we'll get...
Well, she cleans it before she uses it.
We'll worry about that some other time.
I picked Spirited Away because that was the first Ghibli film I ever watched. Yeah, I don't know why I really love it.
It was their Oscar-winning mass. I mean, they had distributed other stuff to the West before this, but that was the one that put them on the map. I think that's an excellent pick. Okay, that's pretty much it on Howl's Moving Castle. We've let this go a little bit longer than our weekend roundup. I honestly did not think this was going to be as long as it turned out to be. I was a little long in the synopsis, I know, but I'm just glad that we got to talk about it. That's it for our weekly highlight. Next week, be sure to catch us on our weekend roundup on Monday at 10 a.m. We're going to be discussing some of the stuff that we see this weekend. I am going to be pretty preoccupied this weekend. I got to drive up to Cincinnati on Sunday, so I'm not getting to make full use of my Sunday to go see movies. But we are actually going to a showing of Piece by Piece tonight. I'm going to go see that with my 15-year-old little brother, Mr. Danny Davis.
Shout out, Danny!
He will probably be joining us for another movie night tomorrow night, which we will use to record some thoughts of his on what he thinks about Piece by Piece and what we think about it in general. I'm very much looking forward to that. That's, of course, the documentary about Pharrell, completely animated in Lego. Super cool stuff.
Featuring Kendrick Lamar.
Mr. Lamar. So Piece by Piece. I will go see Venom: The Last Dance at some point.
I probably won't. I don't know, but I did go see Terrifier, so who knows? That's fair. I mean, you never know.
If you get bored and I'm doing it, you might as well be doing it.
Right.
Conclave. We'll be talking about Conclave. I will be talking about Conclave.
Yeah.
That's It's gonna be a tough one. It's gonna be a tough one for me personally, but I'm gonna try and just give you the best unbiased reviews that I can give on it. And then finally, We Live in Time, the Andrew Garfield Florence Pugh movie, is hitting the theaters. I think it actually premiered last weekend at most places, but it's opening in wide release this weekend. Emily's gonna be checking that one out. I don't know if I'm gonna get around to it. That might be one that you see on Sunday, but
to just ramble about how hurt I am.
Are you going to bring a cardboard cutout of Florence Pugh with you?
No, because I don't have one, but I can put a picture of her face on top of the cardboard cutout of Taylor Swift that I have.
You're going to cut her eyes out?
I could just make a mask. I'm just going to make a Florence Pugh mask. You're going to make an Andrew Garfield mask, and yeah.
More like Florence Pugh.
We're going to be living in time.
Yeah. So we'll cover all that on our next week's podcast. In the meantime, thank you guys for joining us on our ramble sesh for Howl's Moving Castle.
Got a little long in the tooth. We apologize, but we really love this movie.
I think that if we're here to talk about it and we can talk about it for an hour, let's talk about it for an hour.
That's what we're here for.
I can't wait to share some more stuff with you guys. We'll have some more options, and please suggest things to us. I really want to hear...
This is fun, and this is exciting, and it's new to us, too. Yeah, so, whatever suggestions...
Put me in a position where I see something that I haven't seen before, and I dig into it in a way that I haven't. I'm all here for that. But for now, we're just going to keep bringing you the best of the Davis family. And that's about it. So thanks for joining again, guys. And I'm Zach Davis signing out.
And I'm Emmy Davis. And we out of here.
See ya around.
Adios, brother.
Bye.